I talked about the Ganges coming down from the high Himalaya. So just while you've been doing this practice, I've been thinking about it. The Ganges comes down any high mountains, we've got a mountain here, we've got a whole mountain range just here, where the rainfall all falls at the highest peak. And then it comes, washes down into the plains below. So like in India, it washes down from the Himalayas, falls, and what happens? It forms these rivers and so on, and it flows through, feeding, and first of all, it grows all our food, agriculture, cooks our food, washes through the whole of humanity, and then quenches our thirst, does everything like that. Water. And then it goes back into the river, goes back out to the ocean. And that, for a sage I met in a place called Krishnagiri in Tamil Nadu, he actually mentioned this to me. He said to me, have you ever thought about water? What does water do? So this is the kind of image he gave. So basically water falls on the high mountain, comes, washes through the whole of humanity, and it keeps nothing for itself. And so too, the consciousness that we are, washing through all our thoughts, washing through us as human beings, keeps nothing for itself. And this whole image of the river Ganga coming down from the Himalayas, taking and personalizing, as we were saying earlier, personalizing this I thought, right? Taking the thought to be ourselves, when we get in conflict and we get confused, and that where the river Ganges turns as they're trying to go back to its source, that symbolizes that confusion, that conflict in every human being's life, when the crisis no longer relative to us is ourselves, and we are the crisis and the reason for the crisis. Okay, then where do we go? And so this has always been the tradition. You've always been able to go to the teacher of Atma Gyanam, self-knowledge. So for the river coming down and turning as though trying to find its source, the symbolism is so beautiful here, because for the river to find its source, it just has to look at itself. Water. So to the human being, right? To find our source, all we have to look at is ourselves. And for the river to go back to its source, how far does it have to turn? It doesn't have to go anywhere. And so the same is true for us. How far? Where do we have to go? What is, as we were saying earlier, what is the destination of all the thoughts? What is the destination of the wave in the ocean? I was talking about this morning's class. Like, what is the destination of the wave in the ocean? The ocean is having come out of the ocean, the destination of every wave is ocean. It's got nowhere else to go. So our destination, what would it be if not ourselves? Yeah? So this is why even, that symbolism of Varanasi and the symbolism in this tradition is impeccable. I mean, so having taken the thought of ourselves to be the truth of who we are, getting in crisis, getting confused, getting conflicted, what do we want to know? We want to know the owner of the thought. We want to take ownership of our lives again. So that thought needs to be resolved. The thought of what? I needs to be resolved. And it doesn't get resolved through doing practices. If at all anything happens with practices, is they prepare the mind, called adhikari, mumukshutvam, making the mind ready to accept this knowledge having taken ourselves to be a limited person for so long, our whole lives, we can't actually believe when you get told that you are the limitless, eternal absolute. How do you believe that? Yeah, but that is the reality. And so the teacher, you need to be prepared for this understanding. So the teacher's job is to prepare the mind of the student to finally resolve the understanding of themselves. And that resolution comes from analyzing and challenging the nature of this I. Because that's all that's confusing, and that's all that's getting us in trouble and getting us in conflict. And not only with ourselves. This I is all that's getting conflicted in the whole society. Right? So it's now, with this whole situation that we find ourselves in, self-knowledge is the crucial to the whole society, to be able to regain our future and take it back, right? And take back our humanity, having lost ourselves to what? Individuality. It's like a virus. This individuality has taken over the whole human race. And we're all obsessed with one little thought, I. And so this whole symbolism of Varanasi again. Varanasi used to be called Kashi. The city of Varanasi is the oldest city in the world, as some people say. So, and the city of Varanasi used to be called Kashi. Kashi means giving up that which we love the most. And what do we all love the most? When you get into that crisis and conflict, what do you give up? You give up the idea of yourself. Because you want to learn, you want to understand the truth. So this symbolism of Kashi, giving up that which we love the most. We love the idea of ourselves more than we love ourselves more than anything else. If we're brutally honest with ourselves, yeah, we love ourselves more than anything. Nothing wrong, everybody's the same. So getting to come to that point of questioning and trying to do this on one's own, right? Having taken all our ideas to be truth, we keep on getting hijacked by one thing, an I thought, right? So trying to do it on our own is very, very difficult. And that's why Shankara said, please, begged her, please don't try and do this on your own, because you'll just find yourself being hijacked by the same thought that you're trying to get rid of. It can't resolve itself. So the teacher is the one who does the job of taking the I to its natural source, its natural root. The difference between all our other thoughts and the I thought is rooted in consciousness. That's why it's so difficult. It's the closest thought there is to us. All the other thoughts that we have are rooted in the world, all relative. But this I thought, it creates a big problem. Also, trying to do this on our own, just think, when you go and say you go to a big city and somebody says, hey, you say to them, I'm hungry. I really like to eat something. And then they say to you, okay, well, what food do you like? So in the big city, what kind of food's available? You've got Japanese, you've got Chinese, you've got Indian, you've got Mexican, you've got French, Italian, you've got all the different varieties of foods, right? And what do we go for? We go for the one that we like the most. So if we like Italian, we go for Italian, right? And this is a really interesting phenomenon. Pretty obvious. So then what we do, I feel like Italian. I like Italian. Okay, so then out of all the Italian, you go for what? Either pasta or pizza or whatever. So then you say, okay, which is the best pasta restaurant? So you find the best pasta restaurant, or you find the best pizza restaurant, whatever. Then you go there, then looking at the menu, so having the whole wide variety of choice available to us in the food cuisine world, right? We choose one thing, boom, what we love the most. Okay? And then, when it comes to the menu, looking at the menu, what do you choose on the menu? You've got a whole menu of stuff. What do you choose? The one you like the most. All right? So when it comes to this, trying to understand the knowledge of ourselves, what are we going to do? We're going to do the same thing. We're going to edit out everything that we don't like. Okay? And you get nowhere. So the same way, you know, as the teacher, so the teacher takes us to the truth. Now, what is this relationship with teacher? I mean, it's just, the teacher of self-knowledge is your best friend. Because why? They introduce you to your best friend, who is who, and who has always been what? Yourself. Who is our best friend? And this is why in the Gita, Bhagavad Gita, Krishna and Arjuna have been friends for life. Before Krishna introduces Arjuna to the self-knowledge, which is what he teaches in the Gita, they're buddies. They're like being friends forever. And so that's the symbolism there as well, is that Arjuna is getting to know himself. And his self, being pointed out, has always been his best friend, God. Okay? So self is nothing but God. So this is why this I is a very interesting word. It's like a treasure chest. And this is the secret that the creation has been hiding from us our whole lives, is the secret of this I. So getting like going this relationship between the teacher and the student. Just think, when we get lost in a city, trying to find an address, all right? What happens? You use your GPS, you go, you find a GPS doesn't work, battery doesn't work, battery runs out, then what do? You go driving around looking for the address and can't find it anywhere. What do? We turn to somebody local, someone who understands the neighborhood, right? And you go to them, and by that time, what have you done? Just like when this I gets in crisis and in conflict with itself, the dress is just a relative thing, okay? We're trying to find some dress in a city. The same thing happens. You get into crisis, you get into conflict. You're meeting your buddies at the restaurant and you can't get there. Problem, right? Because something is standing in the way of your happiness. Ignorance. Ignorance of an address is standing in the way of your happiness. So now what do? You get all conflicted in crisis and everything. Then where do? You go to someone local. Hey, please help me. I'm trying to find this address. And then what do? They just point it out. The address that was already there. But in that whole exchange, what happens? We're ready to drop all our ideas, okay, just to get the truth. Because we're in conflict and we're in crisis and we want to get to those destinations. So then what happens? Your mind is ready, prepared to accept that whatever that person you ask, so that person becomes the teacher, okay, for that moment. They become guru, they get rid of the darkness, right? And this is all the word guru means, the remover of darkness. So, when it comes to ourselves, right, in conflict and in crisis, we are perfectly prepared and ready, you know, to accept the truth. And if we aren't prepared to accept the truth, say for instance the guy points out the restaurant and you say, no, I don't think that's the restaurant, it doesn't look like it looked on the internet when I Googled it. Then do you get to the restaurant? No, because you're going to keep on going around and round, looking everywhere. But what mostly happens is when the person points out the destination, what happens? How often has this happened to us? You're driving around and around in circles, and then you go to someone local and say, please, I'm looking for this dress, and they point it out and say, but you're right here, this is right here, that's the address. You just couldn't see it, right? And the same is true when it comes to ourselves. Looking for ourselves everywhere, in and through everything. We're going to edit out everything that we don't like, but Nothing that we're doing is pointing out the one looking. So having looked outside in the world for completeness, looked outside in the world for happiness, then getting told by our friends, oh, you know what, you must try meditation, you must try yoga, you must, it's all inside. So then you go looking inside, right? Anybody found it inside anywhere? Because it's not anywhere, it's not outside, inside, it's in the one looking. Yeah? So then, how do you know that? You're going to just keep on looking, orbiting one thing, going around in an orbit around one thing, I. Orbiting this I. Getting involved in all kinds of philosophies and all sorts of concepts, all about one thing, human being. And philosophies and philosophers, what does the word philosopher mean? It means they're still philosophizing about the truth. They haven't worked it out yet. Right? So this is the whole thing. How do you work out the truth about yourself? You've got to go some person somewhere where that person has already had it pointed out to them. Right? Like when you get lost in the city and you find out the address of the city, then your friends come along and they also get lost, and then you can point it out to them and say, no, 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 hang on, you just go here, 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 and you point it out, boom, you get the address, right? Same thing with this knowledge. Yeah? Once you've had it pointed out, you can then point it out to everybody else. Right? Wow, I found this teaching, you know. Huh. Amazing, it resolved this whole story for me. All my conflict and crises are gone. So basically what happens once you understand self-knowledge, when you understand yourself, people wonder why on earth this fellow is so happy all the time and feeling absolutely peaceful no matter what the situation is. Yeah, because you understand yourself as the peace itself, as the completeness itself. Before you even look for completeness, you already are the completeness you are looking for and searching so desperately for. Just like the river Ganges coming down from the Himalayas, looking for its source, the water, already it is the water. What to do? Where does it have to go looking? And that's the symbolism. So looking for the truth of this I, the truth of ourselves, looking outside, where are we going to get, you know? Looking inside, where are we going to get? It's all in the one looking, the one seeing, seeking. So the seeker of the truth is the truth. And this is what the word Upanishad means. Sitting near, upa, near to the sat, truth. Already the truth. We just don't know it. And so traditionally, what would happen is the teacher would come through the village beating the drum of Vedanta, beating the drum of truth, and calling everybody interested. They'd go and sit under the banyan tree, which is why we have a banyan tree on our logo. And they would sit under the tree, which has always been the classroom in India, and then the teacher teaching, the person listening recognizes that now this teacher is only teaching and talking about me. Right? Talking about the truth that they are. Talking about the truth that we are. So finally we start recognizing that someone's telling us about ourselves, and then how far do we have to go for that thought to be resolved? There is no distance. Everything else other than yourself, there is a distance between you, and you have to do something to get it. But to get yourself, there's nothing you can do. Already who you are, already the nature of ourselves, already the nature of completeness, there's nothing you can do other than the teaching. So please, this is very, very crucial to understand this. No matter how much practices we do, how many practices we do, no practice can ever bring us to what we already are. the thing the practice can do is help remind us, once we understand the nature of truth and understand the nature of ourselves, the practices can remind us that already, before we even think of truth, we are the truth. Where else are you going to find the truth? But with oneself. And so this is what the teaching shows us. Yeah? That already you are the truth. Before you even start looking, truth has already found you, you know. And this is the beauty of this tradition. And it's Sanatan Dharma. Sanatan Dharma means that which is ever fresh. Ever fresh. There's no time when it is not. So these, like we were doing in the Upasana, the silence, ever the same, never changes. Space, always the same, never changes. Only the forms are coming and going in space. The space never changes. The space here is the same space everywhere. Consciousness here, same consciousness everywhere. Where do you have to go to be conscious? Do we go? Do we go up somewhere like on holiday? I'm going to go and be conscious. Do we do that? Right? Or I'm going to go on holiday to enjoy silence. Do we do that? No, we go on holiday, we go to a destination to enjoy something exotic. But we forget the most exotic thing is the one going. The human being, yourself. Before you even look for anything exotic, you are the most exotic thing on the planet. Rachel was just talking about how flowers, you know, are coming out all around the place. It's springtime now, so flowers are just blooming everywhere. We've got wild flowers growing everywhere that you least expected. And the flower of the human being, the flowering of the human being is the most exotic there is in the universe. Why? Because it is the flowering of the very creator itself, the creation itself, in the knowledge of itself, in self-knowledge, Atma. This is the nature of what's always been shared by these teachings of the Vedas, Veda Upanishads. And, you know, what does it take to be conscious? Can you be unconscious? Where? How? And do we have to do anything to be conscious? The only thing that we are getting lost in is a thought, or a whole group of thoughts, depending on what we are obsessing with. But the most obsessive thought is this I thought. So once we understand the nature of the one holding on to this I thought, then the thought's no longer a problem, right? They no longer bother you. Once you understand yourself as the thinker of the thoughts, thought itself, then what thought can bother you? Where? So we go into all these things in self-knowledge classes. We go into the nature of thoughts and the management of thoughts. How do you manage your thoughts? By knowing the thinker of the thoughts, no longer lost in thoughts. Once you know yourself as the thinker of the thoughts, how big is a thought? Anybody seen a thought running around anywhere? We give dimension to the thoughts. Right? No thought has ever been a problem for anybody. No thought has ever done anything to anybody. We do everything to the thoughts. Because why? Because we don't know ourselves as the thinker of the thoughts. We take the thought to be real. So what happens? Consciousness itself magnifying the thought, right? Not knowing itself magnifies this thought and makes the thought more important. Limiting or trying to limit the unlimitable, right? Trying to limit the limitless. Because consciousness is limitless. But then what do? We limit ourselves down to a tiny little thought, and that becomes the lens through which we perceive our lives and ourselves and everything, through a tiny little thought. And then what happens when you believe yourself to be a thought, that thought gets challenged, and then we feel challenged. And then when you get into a crisis and conflict, the very thought that you're hanging on to so desperately is the thought that's dragging you deeper and deeper and deeper into crisis. So, understand the thinker. Then thoughts are no longer issue, no longer a problem. So this whole thing of like yoga chitta vritti nirodha in yoga. What is chitta vritti? What is the biggest vritti? The thought modification, the thought we have of ourselves. And it's perfectly demonstrated when you look at this iPhone. Yeah? Have you ever watched anybody losing their phone? Woo! We become contortionists, right? Looking everywhere. Yeah, I mean, wherever we lost that phone, boy, I mean, that's, we get completely carried away. And complete crisis and conflict happens, losing all our numbers, losing everything, losing social media, losing. So what are we doing? That iPhone is exactly the same as the I thought. Pouring all our energy and all our identification into one idea, one thought. We're doing the same thing with this iPhone. And if we watch ourselves when the iPhone gets lost, just imagine what happens when this I thought gets into trouble, right? What happens to us then? And it's happening to us all the time. But we don't see it, right? So we do yoga, we do meditation. And what happens in the yoga and the meditation, we just suspend that thought of I for some time, momentarily. But it comes back. And also what happens in deep sleep, we suspend this I thought. We don't suspend it, it just suspends naturally. In deep sleep, any I thought, any thought of yourself, nothing. That's why we're so beautiful when we wake up in the morning, everything's absolutely beautiful because the I thought has been, the individuality has been suspended in that moment of deep sleep. So now what are we doing if we are falling asleep in the practices? Yeah? Practices are there to remind you that you are the meditation itself. You are the yoga itself, not the practice. If you don't know yourself as the yoga, the meditation itself, still getting lost in practices, then that's not the whole point of the practice. The practice is there to remind me that I am present. And if I don't know what is present, then I'm going to have a problem still. Because, and this is a huge problem, especially when you start doing a lot of very powerful pranayama practices and releasing all kinds of shakti, pran, all over the place, right? What happens is immediately the mind identifies and goes into identification and gets locked again in all the grantis, all the locks, yeah? And we're trying to clear these chakras. The chakras are all fine, perfectly clear. The whole universe is perfect. You know, every day is a perfect day. So who's getting conflicted? Who's getting locked? I. That's it. So the practices of yoga, yeah, they break the locks, they break the thing, but then to just go and get locked into the practice, that's not the idea. So when you combine the two, self-knowledge and yoga together, everything works. The self-knowledge works because the yoga reminds you that you are the consciousness. You are Atma. You are nothing but the truth. You are unlimited. You're the limitless, immortal absolute. You know? But with so much stuff going on in society, so much stuff on the food chain, like impacting on the mind, impacting on the body, all these pesticides, everything that we're eating in the food chain, is all impacting on us. So that's why you need the yoga. You need the practices to just iron that all out, iron out all the doshas. Yeah? And then it's easy to see clearly through all the thoughts that to the thinker of the thoughts. Yeah, very simple, no complications. But only if you've been taken through these teachings, through the teaching of self-knowledge. And this is why it's a sad thing that we've had so many of these teachers behaving, badly, let's say. Yeah. So people don't want to know about gurus anymore, or teachings, or anything. We want to do it all on our own. We want to do everything on our own. Yeah? And so trying to do this on our own, we're going to end up where? Just by taking our thought to be ourselves, we've ended up in a cul-de-sac anyway, here in the creation, right? So that once you understand the nature of yourself, does that mean that thought of yourself has to disappear and you have to get rid of it? No. You need that to operate in society. I can't go to the airport and catch a plane and the guy asks me, who are you? And I say, I'm Brahman, the absolute, immortal absolute. But they'll lock me up. I'm the nameless. I don't have name. They'll lock me up. So you've got to go there, you've got to say, I'm John, but no problem. So this is what we need to, it's not, this whole thing now, the teaching that was putting every teacher on a pedestal has to now come down to earth. Everybody who can understand this knowledge needs to understand this knowledge. It's no longer exclusive knowledge, where you have to understand Sanskrit and be a Sanskrit cowboy, and you have to understand all the Upanishadic texts. It's no longer that kind of exclusive property of people sitting on some pedestal somewhere. It belongs to every human being. And so in the past, when a child would be able to read and write, it was exceptional. We thought, wow, this kid can read and write. Now, by the age of 8, a kid must read and write. Otherwise, they're thought to have a learning disability, right? So the same with this self-knowledge. Education. That's all that's needed. To educate us in the true nature of ourselves, so that we no longer look for happiness and completeness in the world. We know ourselves are the completeness. Now imagine how these people are going to operate in the future with this knowledge. Knowing on myself as a whole and complete already, I can no longer get lost in roles, ideas, identifications, individuality, anything. I just absolutely function at 1,000, never mind 1,000%, 1,000,000%, because I'm no longer tied and governed by the role, governed by my ideas, governed by my behavior, anything. Ignorance doesn't dictate to me anymore. No longer ignorant of myself, I can function in the world. And that is what this knowledge is now here for. Not to make me some saint sage sitting on a cloud somewhere. It's not meant for that anymore. And so everybody already enlightened, we just don't know it. We're all enlightening our thoughts all the time. Who's enlightening this thought of I? I am. Yeah? So everybody's all enlightened. There's nobody that isn't enlightened, right? Just getting lost in one obsessive idea of ourselves, that creates all our problems. So this is why this self-knowledge is crucial for everybody, especially now that we've all been doing so much yoga and so many things. We're ready for it. We prepared the mind for it. Now the teaching must take place. So I think that's what we just want to share, and that's what we are sharing on our ashram. We're still in touch every day with our ashram in India, with my master, who's teaching on the weekends and things, and we keep on looking at it and listening and getting the teachings blasting out. He's blasting out like crazy right now because of COVID. And now when you listen to the master talking about COVID and death and everything like that, and death is just a pickle. Because you are the truth. What is going to worry you? But we need to slowly catch the monkey. Yeah, we can't go into that high fleeting atmosphere. where the absolute alone exists. We still need to take baby steps. Yeah. So in the tradition, the teachers that we've had up to now have all taught us about the relative. Now comes the teaching of the absolute, the I, the self. And that's always been the tradition. And so a person who is considered uneducated in India is the person who doesn't know themselves. Never mind India, the creation. The person who knows themselves in the eyes of creation is a mature human being. They have flowered in the knowledge of themselves. So, thank you for joining us and listening to me. And I hope we see you again soon.